Welcome back. I've slowed down the speech speed because one of you asked, and unfortunately I'm slowing down production due to real-life stuff, but I think I can maintain an episode every other day until things calm down. Anyway, we are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing. Going Native, Chapter 8.
I, Eustace Jefferson Grant, take Daniel Starling to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold, in sickness and in health. I promise to love you, and care for you, for every day of my life. I promise to give you all I can, accept everything you have to give, and more than anything, to always be kind.
Stace sat up in the dark next to the low fire with a gasp, tears streaming down his face. He hadn't had a dream like that in a long time, had barely had any dreams at all in years. Stace panted, the memories fresh and raw. He had tried, he really had. Through the coughing and the chemo, the lawyers, his witch of a mother-in-law. Stace always tried to be kind, to keep those vows. And when he couldn't, he left. Shoulders racked with quiet sobs, face in his hands, Stace sat in the dark alone with his memories. Ella had, after an exhausting dinner, accepted a shot of broad-spectrum antibiotics and gone to sleep. In her state even a short day seemed to wear her out. Iing and Stace had cleaned up, then Stace had sat up for a while, carving another bowl while he started working on his grand plan to keep the three of them alive. When Stace finally settled on the floor next to Iing, he had hoped exhaustion would take him through the night. Instead here he was, trapped by all the memories he was trying to escape. A pair of arms wrapped around Stace from behind with an accompanying spiced floral scent. While he shook, Iing whispered in his ear. Stace couldn't understand the words, but the feeling of warm breath at his ear and the arms wrapped around him, slowly rubbing his chest through his rough wool shirt, felt soothing in a very human way. Stace tried to turn, to break away from the alien and the embrace, but the arms around him tightened and Iing whispered one of the few words of English he knew. No. After a few minutes, Stace started to calm down and let himself get pulled back down to the floor.
So, sleep well.
Iing jerked his head over to stare at the grinning Ella. He had slept longer than the other two, and Stace had already gone somewhere. Iing had just stood up and started to stretch when the soldier had started in with the comments.
What do you mean?
I woke up before the two of you did. The fire was pretty low, but I could see you wrapped around the human like a scarf.
She grinned at him, then patted the bed next to her.
You know, if you were that cold you could just climb up here.
I am pretty sure that bed couldn't handle another person on it.
He gave the woman a smirk, willing to play along if it meant she didn't think too much about what she saw.
There are far more fulfilling ways to break a bed anyway.
Ha!
Ella let out a laugh, though her clenched jaw afterwards made it clear that the results of the backwards surgery was still bothering her. She was wearing a shirt at least, though it was definitely too small. She waved Stace's strange day tapad with one hand.
You are a lot more fun in the morning. Less snook.
I'm just not awake yet. The snark will come.
He pointed at the pad, noticing a thin wire going from it and through a small hole in the wall, the hole stuffed with a rag to prevent a draft.
Does the human know you have that?
Yeah, he showed me how to use it and everything. It's primitive, but actually pretty interesting. It's just a giant library.
Oh.
Iing got closer. He couldn't make out any of the words in the strange human script, but he was interested in seeing what sort of thing Stace would consider important.
Apparently when Eustace decided to come out here, he got a tablet and just stuffed it with whatever he thought he might need. It has thousands of documents on here, all organized and ready to go. Lots of fiction, some porn, but mostly guides.
Ella gave Iing a sly grin that he found a little alarming.
This is huge for us.
How so?
Well, we don't need the human anymore. Or at least we won't once I'm healed up.
Aang gave her a blank stare.
What do you mean that we won't need the human?
Elora started to speak faster, obviously excited by her idea.
I mean, we should keep him around. Obviously. He's useful. But this thing has instruction manuals for surviving in the Earth wilderness. There are guides on hunting and fishing, cooking, even how to fix the bed.
She gave the bed another pat, which responded with a groan.
The important thing is, if something happens to him or, goddess forbid, we have to get rid of him, we'll be fine. I will be able to take care of us.
She gave Aang a big smile that she probably figured he would find comforting. Considering what she just said, he found it disturbing. Aang stared at her, dumbfounded. After a few moments and a calming breath, he replied,
Well, that's certainly an idea.
It means we can be independent. We don't have to tie his fate to ours.
Right. We would just have to kill him and take all his stuff, or send him out into the cold alone.
Aang glared at her, his lilac skin darkening as his anger built until it almost matched her naturally deeper indigo tones.
You know, I figured you might be a little extreme. I just didn't expect you to be such a raging bitch.
Elora seemed to deflate a little, losing her confidence under the small man's glare.
That's not what I meant. I just mean, well, you saw how he reacted when I introduced myself. The man isn't stable. We can't rely on someone who can't even manage talking to us.
Right. Because talking to us is so much more important than feeding us, clothing us, and saving our lives twice each. If he can't have a nice chat, might as well murder him.
Aang was silent for a moment.
Where is this all coming from? Yesterday, the two of you were getting along great.
Elora let out a sigh.
I will admit I might have some small prejudice against humans.
That would win understatement of the century if Aang was the one handing out the awards.
If you are right about the food situation, though, we are going to have to make hard choices. Fewer mouths to feed might make all the difference, and the earlier we make that decision the less food wasted. This is a survival situation and I want us to survive. I don't want to hurt anybody, and I do like the human. He seems nice, but if it comes down to him or us, I choose us.
Aang thought about the pistol in the duffel bag and the firearms in the drawer. This could get very, very bad. The human tramped into the room, dripping wet and carrying a wooden bucket in one hand. After dropping the bucket onto the floor near the door, he went straight for the fire, stripping as he went. His shirt and pants made wet snaps as he threw them on the drying rack, and within a few moments he was stark naked aside from his wrapped-up feet, wiping himself down with a rag and trying to get warmed up. Elora did not like how her conversation with Aang had gone. It had gotten all twisted coming out of her mouth. She wanted to make it clear that when things went bad, she could protect the smaller male and they didn't have to worry about the human. Instead, she seemed to have lost what little respect Aang may have had for her. At least she had a show to watch. Elora's apprehension towards humans did little to distract from the fact that they seemed to tick all of her boxes. Seeing Eustace standing there, backlit by the firelight, the flickering shadows adding contrast and definition to his muscles. She wasn't expecting the pang of shame that filled her. As Aang brought the human some dry clothes, Eustace had reached out and Elora could see dark, angry purple bruises encircling his forearm. Bruises that were a precise match to the shape of her hand. She had acted badly from the start.
Miss Elora of Helium, can you do me a favor?
Elora's gaze moved up, looking at the human, giving her a grin.
What do you need, not a Dr. Stace?
I want to teach the both of you how to prep the fish I caught. I will need you to translate.
He looked a little sheepish as he ran a hand through his still damp hair.
I have been thinking about it, and I want to make sure the two of you know enough to be able to fend for yourselves in case something happens to me.
Elora was stunned. Here was her idea, presented the way she wished she had explained it to Ieng.
What could happen to you? You've been here for a decade. What could happen to you? You've been here for a decade.
Yeah, but we are going to have to be more active and take more risks than I normally would want to do in the winter.
He gestured at the bucket.
I don't normally use a gill net this close to the winter because if the net gets stuck in the ice it would be a major issue.
The human rubbed the back of his neck with one hand, and Elora could see the edge of that bruise again as his sleeve slipped back.
Well, it got stuck. I ended up having to hack through the ice with a hatchet and basically ruined the net. On the plus side, we have enough fish to stretch our food quite a bit. I did end up soaking wet, though, and would be in pretty awful shape if the river wasn't so close to the cabin.
Stace continued.
What I mean to say is that it won't be a nice relaxing winter indoors, at least not for me. I run the very real risk of getting into an accident, attacked by animals, or even just dying from exposure. I want to make sure the both of you can manage if I get hurt. I can't speak your language and Ieng can't speak mine. Will you translate for us?
She gave a firm nod, then turned to Ieng.
It looks like the human wants to teach us a few things. He asked me to translate for him.
Teach us what?
She could see the suspicion in his eyes. Did she really screw things up that badly with Ieng that he didn't even trust her to relay information?
He wants to teach us how to survive out here. He's afraid that if he's out hunting and fishing for us he might get hurt and we would have to fend for ourselves.
Ieng gave her a look she couldn't quite process.
So instead of your idea of killing him and reading some books, we get a professional educator who has lived here for nearly half of my lifetime teaching us, and he goes out and catches our dinner, asking for nothing in return.
Elora sat in thought for a few moments. Right now, she was in a uniquely advantageous situation. Being the translator, she could easily control the flow of information. On the battlefield, being able to decide who knew what was crucial. Making sure that Ieng and Eustace couldn't communicate on their own ensured that there was nothing going on that she didn't know about. It was a fantastic tool for her. Elora made her decision.
I am going to offer the human a trade.
A trade?
Ieng furrowed his brows.
What sort of trade?
I am going to teach him shill.
Stace was impressed by how quickly Ieng took to the chore of preparing the fish. They were nothing special, just some trout and a couple of perch, but having some fresh meat would stretch out the food budget substantially. As Ieng's nimble hands ran the knife along the length of the fish, separating a fillet, Stace thought of a question.
Kind of a weird question, but what is the fish situation like on other worlds? Ieng is taking to this like, well, like a fish to water. Like he has done this before.
A few words back and forth in that bizarre language, and Elora had a reply for him.
Fish are fish. He has never seen this kind of fish before, but Ieng enjoys preparing food and keeping house. He has done this before, just not, with these fish specifically.
I see.
He looked at the two aliens. The sexual dimorphism between the two wasn't as extreme as, say, what a lanternfish had to put up with, but it certainly was striking.
Mind another question? It's not fish related, but it might be kind of personal.
Elora raised an eyebrow.
What would you like to know?
I gathered that Ieng is a civilian, and you're a soldier. Are you some sort of genetically modified super soldier Sodder, or are you just naturally, big?
Elora's laughter only subsided when she was clutching her gut with a little moan of pain.
I forget sometimes that you know nothing about us. This is normal. Ieng is a male, which means he is supposed to be soft and sweet and properly masculine, taking care of the house and home while us big strong women make sure everything is safe. Humans are the weird ones.
Stace was silent as he thought about the way the two had been acting, then thought about his own past. It hurt, but being around people again, strange and interesting people, seemed to make the ache just a little softer.
I think everyone's weird.
Ellery was trying to buy his loyalty by being nice to the human. Ian was sure of it. As long as it meant Stace stayed alive, he was willing to accept that. If Stace died, they were all dead. Ian didn't think Ellery really understood the gravity of their situation. She was wounded, but getting wounded was part of the job for the military. She didn't know what they were actually facing. She hadn't even been out of bed. Her suggestion of teaching Stace how to speak their language caught him off guard. He hadn't expected her to offer him anything, and if Stace and Ian could communicate he would be able to warn Stace of the danger. She had to have known that. Was this her way of apologizing? Once a midday meal was over the fire, Stace found a stick of soft white stone in one of his boxes and went into the pantry. He labeled everything he could. It would be a pain to get Ellery to translate it all, but Ian figured that with whatever recipes were in Stace's tablet he would be able to figure out a meal plan. Along with the labels, Stace wrote a number. The number served as a sort of preference based on how long each food would keep.
I really wish we had something to write on. It will be a pain to try to manage this without at least a stylus and some paper.
Ellery relayed this to Stace, who thought for a minute and went over to one of the chests against the wall. After some digging, he returned to Ian and handed him a thin box made of some sort of white cardboard. Ian pulled it open and looked at it in confusion. It was another tablet identical to the one Ellery had spent the day playing with. Clearly brand new, still in its original packaging. The crazy human had brought a spare. Of course he had. While Ian held it, Stace flipped a little switch on the side and it powered on. Then he pressed a spot on the top and, with a little click, what looked like a little antenna poked up. Ian reached up and pulled out the glossy white stylus. As soon as it was out, the screen flashed and turned into a blank white page. While Ian poked and played with the stylus, Stace went over to Ellery. The two spoke in that odd harsh human tongue, and soon the same little mechanical click came from her tablet. After a back and forth, Ellery waved Ian over.
Okay, here's how this works. If you tap the middle button while the stylus is out, it opens this little bar with icons on it. The one with the cross is to make a new sheet, the one with a bunch of dashes stacked up brings you to a list of all the sheets you have made. That thing there is meant to represent a garbage receptacle and tapping it will get rid of your sheet. You can just write and it will make lines, and if you rub the smooth back part of the stylus on the screen it gets rid of what you wrote. This up here.
And with that comment Ellery pointed up at the corner, showing a rectangle with a stubby extrusion on one side. The rectangle contained 5 small squares, 1 black and 4 white.
This indicates how much power your tablet has left.
She showed hers off, which had 5 black squares. Then she unplugged the small cable going to her tablet and showed Ian where to plug it in. All the while, Ian kept an eye on Stace. He was using the distraction of the tablet to rewrap the bandages on his feet, positioning his body so that neither of the shill could see exactly what he was doing. Definitely not the best sign. The little lesson was interrupted with a snap as they both turned to see Stace plant a foot on the seat of the wooden chair and, with a grunt, use both hands to rip one of the arms off. This was followed by a dull scraping noise as he used a knife to smooth any loose bits of wood out of the way. When he turned to say something to Ellery, the soldier grinned and nodded repeatedly.
Of course I want to get out of bed.
The human raised his hands.
Cool it a little. Don't expect to be doing your backflips just yet. We're just going to get you in the chair. It's a good intermediate step, and it gives me a chance to fix the bed.
Still, Elora was elated. She was making progress and soon she'd be able to sort this whole mess out. It was only once everything was lined up that Elora really had a grasp of what the human was planning. With the arm removed from the chair, it was possible to scoot butt first onto it from the bed with only a small drop to contend with. She sat up and started swinging her hips to the side, pushing with her feet on the bed to move over.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
The human had his arms around her, holding her up. She hadn't even realized she had started to fall over.
Here, let me help.
He guided Elora slowly, holding her so she couldn't tip as the two slowly transferred her over. It almost felt like a dance, and the smell of river water and wood smoke on Stace made her realize how bad she probably smelled by now. The chair was too small, one of Elora's cheeks hanging off the edge a bit, but compared to being trapped in the bed she felt amazing. Like she could take on the world.
How does it feel? Any pain?
Stace looked concerned and reached down to lift up her shirt and check the bandages. Elora saw the opportunity and took it. One of her hands shot out and grabbed his, holding it in place. Elora's indigo thumb contrasted nicely with Stace's pale skin as she rubbed the back of his hand gently.
I feel much better, thanks to you.
She gave him what she hoped was a coy smile and was rewarded with an awkward blush and a stuttering response.
Just take it easy.
Stace rubbed the back of his neck in with his other hand.
I don't want any more setbacks on my patient.
This must be your first time flirting with a guy.
Her head swung over to see Ian glaring at her.
Did you decide to take him off your death list before putting him on the fuck list, or are you planning on both?
The shame hurt, but she tried to push it down as she awkwardly let go of Stace's hand.
It's not like that and you know it.
No, I don't know it. That's the problem.
Is something wrong?
Stace's concern was plain on his weather-worn face.
No, nothing is wrong. Ieng is just mad at me.
Elora gave Stace a wink.
He thinks I'm trying to flirt with you.
Stace's eyes widened and he turned away. Elora could see his ears turning red.
I'm going to take a look at the bed now.
Make sure it's extra sturdy.
Elora patted him on the shoulder for good measure, staggering him a little.
It might need the reinforcement later.
End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff, visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.